In this video, we're going to continue working with arrays, and we're going to look at ways which you can add items to an array and remove items and search for items or just access a specific item in an array. So just to get you started here, again, I have an array. This time it's called foods, and I have 4 items in my array. And I'm setting the output to foods.toString. Of course, this is just my array with commas in between it, and then I'm going to output it. So if I run it, hey, no big surprise, this is my array with commas. All right, let's look at some other fun things we can do with arrays. Let's look at how to access specific items in my array. So here, of course, is my array of foods, and I've set the output to my array with commas in between it. You know how toString works. And here I have accessed item 2 of my array. So foods 2, I am adding to my output, right? Output plus equals a line break, and then foods 2. Now, foods 2, which item do you think that is? Yeah, you guessed it. Arrays start at position 0. So position 0, position 1, position 2 is apples. And then I'm getting the length. Now notice, this is actually not a method call. There's no parentheses after length. Let me say that again. Most of the things that we've been doing with arrays involve running methods with parentheses. Length is actually not a method that we're running. So no parentheses, but in fact, it will tell me the length of foods. So I'm going to add that to the output. Now, of course, the length of this thing is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. However, the positions, just like with strings here, the positions are 0, 1, 2, 3. But the length is 4, but the positions are numbered 0, 1, 2, 3. That shouldn't be anything a whole lot new. So here, when I say foods.length, well, what do you think that's going to do? Interesting. And I'm adding that to my output, and then I'm printing out my output. So let's see what happens when I run it. Yes, this is my array, of course, and item number 2 is apples. 0, 1, 2 is apples. The length is 4, of course, and it says foods at foods.length is undefined. Well, why is that? Well, because there is no item number 4. It's past the end of my array. The last item, very important, the last item in my array is actually length minus 1. If I run it again, oops, if I run it again, there you go. The last item in my array is noodles. All right, let's look at a few more fun things you can do with arrays. I've changed the code a little bit and maybe even pause the video at this point and see if you can figure out what the output will be after I run this code. You got it figured out? All right, so here I have my array of foods, and I'm adding the output. I'm adding the foods to string to my output. Yeah, foods 3. I'm changing the value of foods position 3 to cabbage. 0, 1, 2, 3. So noodles should be changed to cabbage, right? I'm changing foods 3 to cabbage. And then, yes, this is interesting, foods.length. Well, foods.length is 4. So I'm adding to position number 4. Well, that's off the end of my list here. So oranges is going to get added to the end. And then, of course, I'm adding my list to my output, and I'm printing it out. And so, yeah, here is my original list. And, of course, I changed noodles to cabbage. Right, did that right there. And then I added oranges to the end by saying foods.length. Now, there are other ways of adding. We talked about other array methods, of course, but here's another way to add it to the end. By the way, what would happen if I said something like that? Foods position 12 equals oranges. Well, that's way off the end of my list here. If I run it, you'll see that it just fills in. There's a whole bunch of blank positions here. There's just commas in between them. And then finally, position 12, yeah, is oranges. I don't recommend doing this. I would not recommend adding something beyond, like leaving blank spaces in your array beyond that. All right, let's look at a few more things with arrays, and we're almost done. In this example, I'm using a for loop to iterate through my array. So my for loop starts at position 0, right, which is, of course, pizza, and I'm going to less than the length of my array. Again, the length of this array is 4, but remember, the items are located, the indexes are 0, 1, 2, 3. Strings work the exact same way. You start counting at 0, the length is always 1 bigger than the last position. So that's why I'm going less than the length. Very important. Some of you are going x less than or equal to when you're going through strings. No. Start at 0, go less than the length. So to my output, I'm adding a line break and the food at item x, at item 0 the first time, 1 the second time, 3, and so forth. So when I print this out, should be no big surprise, yeah, I get my list written down the page like this, right? It's adding one item at a time to the output with a line break. Yeah, iterating through arrays, very important by using a for loop. All right, a couple more things. Hey, we're almost done, so I hope you can hang with me till the end here. This is an important part here. So I've changed my list of foods. I've added apples a few times. So pizza, apples, apples, noodles, and apples. Yeah, and then I'm using toString to add my array of foods to my output. And now I have a for loop I'm iterating through. Again, I'm starting from 0 and going to less than the length. And I'm checking to see if a particular item, if item X in foods is equal to apples, I'm going to use the splice command. And we've used this before. I'm going to use splice to remove that item. Yeah, the first parameter tells me what position I want to add a new item or remove in this case. The second parameter tells me how many items I'm going to remove. So I'm just going to remove one item. And the rest of the parameters could be, now I don't have anything here, but I could have a list of other items, pizza, I don't know, whatever other, I could list a bunch of items. Those items would get added to my list at position X, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use splice to remove, again, one item at position X. So if I see the item apples, I'm going to remove it. And then I'm going to add my foods again by using toString. I'm going to add it to my output and then print it out. I'm going to run it. You know what it's going to do? It's going to be very exciting. Yeah. Is that what you expected? So here is my array initially, pizza, apples, apples, noodles, apples. And when I went through, every time I saw apples, I removed it. But wait a minute, apples is still in there once. What happened? Now a similar thing, if you remember using lists in Snap, a similar thing happened. When you remove items, if you go in a forward direction like this, let's see what happens. So I got to the first thing. Does that equal apples? No. I got to the second position. Does that equal apples? Yes. When apples got removed, everybody got shifted to the left. So what essentially happened is since my index went up by 1, I'll even do it here. Apples got removed, but my index went up by 1. So I ended up skipping what was previously there because it got shifted down. So the next item I looked at was noodles. That did not get removed. And then my index went up again, and I saw another apples, and I removed that last apple. So what's the moral of the story here? I put apples back. The moral of the story is if you're going to remove an item from an array, you want to go backwards so that you don't skip anything. And I'm going to show you how to go backwards here. Boy, important. I hope you're hanging in there. So what should I start at? I should start at the length of my list -1. Why -1? Well, you know the length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the last position here is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want to start at 4. I want to keep going as long as x is greater than or equal to 0. Some of you are still not looping through strings correctly backwards. I want to start at the length -1. I want to keep going as long as it's greater than or equal to 0, right? I want to go all the way down to position 0, and I want to count backwards, x minus. Yeah. Now, if my item is equal to apples and I remove it, I shouldn't skip anybody. Give this some thought. I'm going backwards. So when I remove something, the list shifts to the left. I'm not removing anything. All right, here we go. Drum roll, please. And yeah, that worked beautifully. I removed apples all 3 times. So for loops go with arrays like, I don't know, like peanut butter goes with jelly, or I don't know, something like that. So for loops, you're going to use these a lot with arrays. And again, there's always a lot of different ways of doing things with arrays. But boy, I'm a fan of iterating through with for loops and using accessing one element at a time like this. There are lots of array methods, lots of array functions that you can look up to do all sorts of things. But I think it's good to stick with the basics. All right, a lot of information about arrays. So thank you so much for watching. All right.